The river flowed the same way it always had, calm on the surface, deep underneath. That night, after words were finally spoken, after feelings were no longer hidden, Ayan and Ryan stood side by side without saying much. They didn't need to. Confession didn't change everything at once. It didn't turn the world dramatic or loud. It simply made everything clear. Ayan felt it in the way the air seemed softer, in the way his chest felt lighter yet fuller at the same time. Ryan stood close, not touching, but near enough that Ayan could feel his warmth. "I was afraid to say it," Ayan admitted quietly, watching the water. Ryan nodded. "So was I." Silence followed, not uncomfortable, just honest. From that night onward, their relationship didn't rush forward like a storm. It unfolded like a sunrise, slow, steady, certain. Every morning, Ayan woke up to the same message. "Good morning. Don't forget to smile today." It was simple. It was gentle. But it carried meaning that warmed him more than sunlight ever could. Ayan always replied with a smile tugging at his lips. "With you in my life, I always smile." Those messages became anchors. No matter how busy the day was, no matter how heavy things felt, they reminded each other. "You're not alone." Ryan never missed a morning. Even on days when he was exhausted, even when life felt overwhelming, that message was non-negotiable. Because love, to him, lived in consistency. They began meeting more often, but never out of pressure, only desire. Sometimes it was the park, where trees whispered secrets and benches remembered their laughter. Sometimes it was a small cafe where the owner already knew their orders. Other times they just walked. Quiet streets at night became their favorite. Streetlights cast long shadows, and their footsteps matched without effort. They talked about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, dreams that felt too big, fears they never told anyone else, favorite songs, worst habits. Ryan listened like every word mattered. Ayan spoke like he finally had space to breathe. One evening, the sky softened into a gentle rain. Not heavy, just enough to scent the earth. They sat under a large tree in the park. Leaves caught droplets, and the world felt wrapped in quiet. "You'll catch a cold," Ryan said, concern threading his voice. Before Ayan could reply, Ryan removed his jacket and draped it over Ayan's shoulders with careful hands. Ayan looked up, surprised, not by the gesture, but by how natural it felt. "You always take care of me," he said softly. Ryan met his gaze. "Because you matter to me." That moment stayed suspended between them. Rain faded into background noise. The world paused. No kiss followed. No dramatic move. Just understanding. And that was enough. Exams came like storms. Unavoidable, demanding, exhausting. Ayan felt the pressure settling into his bones. Sleepless nights. Notes scattered everywhere. His confidence wavered. Ryan noticed immediately. He didn't ask too many questions. He didn't lecture. One evening, as Ayan stared blankly at his books, Ryan gently took his hand. "Look at me." Ayan did. "You are strong," Ryan said, firm but kind. "You've always been. You will do great. And no matter what happens, I'm here." Something in Ayan's chest loosened. "With you beside me," he whispered, "I'm not afraid anymore." Ryan squeezed his hand once, silently promising he meant it. Their romance lived in moments others might overlook. Sharing earphones, each listening to the same song, feeling the same emotion. Leaving handwritten notes where the other would find them unexpectedly. Small gifts, not expensive but thoughtful. A book with highlighted lines. A keychain that said home. A song sent at midnight because it reminded him of the other. They never needed grand gestures daily. Love lived in intention. Ayan didn't expect much on his birthday. He never did. But Ryan had been planning quietly. That evening, he led Ayan back to the river, the same place where everything had begun. Tiny lights flickered along the path. Candles glowed softly. The river reflected warmth. Ayan stopped walking. "What is this?" he whispered. Ryan handed him a folded letter. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from emotion. Ayan read slowly. You came into my life quietly, but you changed everything beautifully. With you, I feel complete. With you, I feel home. Tears blurred the words. No one has ever done something so special for me, Ayan said, voice breaking. Ryan stepped closer, resting his forehead gently against Ayan's. You deserve all the love in the world. Ayan hugged him, softly, deeply. I'm lucky to have you. I'm lucky too, Ryan replied. Time passed and love matured. Even when distance separated them, their connection never weakened. Because love wasn't proximity, it was presence. One night, stars spilled across the sky like secrets. Ayan spoke softly. Promise me one thing. Ryan turned to him. Anything. Promise that no matter what happens, we will never give up on us. Ryan held his hand tightly. I promise. Always. And under that endless sky, they promised to walk together. In happiness. In struggle. In dreams. In life. Their love wasn't loud. It was calm. It was deep. It was real. Love, when it is new, feels light, almost effortless. But when time passes, it asks questions. Not cruel ones. Just honest ones. Ayan and Ryan didn't notice the change at first. Their bond was strong, warm, and steady. Yet slowly, life began to pull them in different directions. Not away from each other, but around each other. And love had to learn how to bend without breaking. Classes became heavier. Responsibilities multiplied. Deadlines crept closer. There were days when Ayan replied late. There were nights when Ryan fell asleep before texting back. Not because they cared less, but because life demanded more. One evening, Ayan stared at his phone, waiting. The message didn't come. A small ache formed in his chest. He's probably busy, he told himself. Still, the silence felt louder than it should. When Ryan finally texted hours later, sorry. Long day. I missed you. Ayan smiled, but the ache didn't fully leave. Love doesn't disappear suddenly. It changes quietly. They still met, still laughed, still held hands. But sometimes words stayed trapped inside. One afternoon in the cafe, Ryan noticed Ayan was quieter than usual. You okay? He asked gently. Ayan hesitated. Yeah. Just tired. It wasn't a lie. It just wasn't the whole truth. Ryan accepted the answer, but something in Ayan's eyes stayed distant. That night, Ayan wrote a message and erased it 3 times before finally sending. Do you ever feel like we're slowly drifting, even though we're trying not to? Ryan stared at the screen for a long time, then replied, I feel scared sometimes too. But drifting doesn't mean losing. It means learning how to stay. Ayan closed his eyes, breathing out slowly. It happened over something small. Ayan wanted to spend the weekend together. Ryan had promised his family he'd help them. I just thought. We planned this, Ayan said, trying to keep his voice calm. I know, Ryan replied, but I can't cancel on them. Silence filled the space between them. Ayan looked away. You always choose them. Ryan's expression changed, not angry, but hurt. That's not fair. The words landed harder than either expected. For the first time, neither reached for the other's hand. They didn't stop talking, but conversations grew shorter. Ayan questioned himself. Am I asking for too much? Ryan questioned himself. Am I failing him without realizing it? Love was still there, but confusion stood beside it. One night, Ryan showed up outside Ayan's place without warning. Ayan opened the door, surprised. I don't want us to become strangers who love each other from a distance, Ryan said quietly. Ayan swallowed. Then talk to me. Don't disappear. I'm here, Ryan replied. I just need you to tell me when you're hurting. Ayan's eyes filled with tears. I don't want to be a burden. Ryan stepped closer. You could never be. They stood there for a long moment before Ayan finally leaned forward, resting his forehead against Ryan's chest. I'm sorry, Ayan whispered. I didn't mean what I said. I'm sorry too, Ryan replied. I should have explained better. They learned then that love wasn't about winning arguments. It was about protecting the bond. Sometimes saying sorry was an act of courage. Things didn't become perfect overnight, but they became honest. They started checking in with each other. Not just how was your day, but how are you really? They learned to listen without interrupting, to explain without accusing, to pause instead of walking away. One evening, as they walked under dim streetlights, Ayan said softly, "I'm scared of losing you." Ryan stopped walking. "You won't," he said. "Not because I promise perfection, but because I promise effort." Ayan smiled through tears. They began choosing each other daily, not just in happy moments but in tired ones, in confusing ones, in difficult ones. Some nights were filled with laughter. Some nights were quiet. Some nights were heavy. But none were empty. One day, Ryan slipped a small note into Ayan's book. Ayan found it later. It read, "Even on days when I'm exhausted, even when words fail, even when life pulls hard, I choose you." Ayan held the note to his chest. Love wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a decision. Ayan lay awake one night, staring at the ceiling. Ryan was asleep beside him, breathing slow and even. That sound usually comforted him. But tonight, his thoughts were louder. What happens after this? After exams? After university? After youth fades? He turned slightly, studying Ryan's face in the dim light. Ryan looked peaceful, unaware of the storm forming quietly inside Ayan. Ayan loved him deeply. That was the problem. Love made him imagine futures he wasn't sure the world would allow. It started subtly. A classmate joking, "You're too close to him, aren't you?" A relative asking, "When will you settle down properly?" A stranger's stare held a second too long. None of it was loud, but it was constant. Ryan handled it better on the surface. He had learned early how to mask his feelings, how to walk carefully through conversations. Ayan, however, felt everything sharply. One afternoon, he finally said it. "Do you ever get tired?" Ayan asked as they sat on a bench watching people pass. "Tired of what?" Ryan replied. "Of hiding, of explaining nothing, of pretending parts of us don't exist." Ryan didn't answer immediately. "Yes," he said finally, "but I get more tired imagining a life without you." Ayan's chest tightened. They didn't talk about the future often, not because they didn't care, but because they were afraid of what it might demand. One evening, rain tapping softly against the window, Ayan broke the silence. "What if, one day, you decide this life is too hard?" Ryan turned to him slowly. "Why would you think that?" "Because sometimes love isn't enough," Ayan whispered. "Sometimes the world wins." Ryan reached for his hand. "Love isn't always enough on its own," he said. "But commitment helps it stand." Ayan looked down. "I don't want to be a chapter you outgrow." Ryan lifted Ayan's chin gently. "You are not a chapter," he said firmly. "You are my story." Then came the opportunity. Ryan was offered a chance, an internship in another city. It was important, career-defining. He hesitated before telling Ayan. When he finally did, Ayan forced a smile. "That's amazing," he said. But that night, he cried quietly in the bathroom, water running to hide the sound. Distance had never truly separated them before. This felt different. "I don't want to hold you back," Ayan said one evening, voice trembling. Ryan frowned. "You're not. But what if I am?" Ayan pressed. "What if staying with me makes you choose less?" Ryan's expression tightened. "Why are you pushing me away?" "I'm trying to protect you." Ryan stood up. "From what?" "From loving you." The words cut deep. They spent the night apart, awake, restless, hurting. For the first time, they didn't say goodnight. Ayan stared at his phone, willing it to light up. Ryan stared at the ceiling, anger fading into fear. What if this is how we end? Both wondered. Morning came without answers. That evening, Ryan showed up again just like before. "I don't want a future that doesn't include you," he said, voice raw. "Even if it's harder." Ayan's tears fell freely. "I'm scared," he admitted. "But I don't want to lose you." Ryan pulled him into a tight embrace. "Then don't," he whispered. "Let's be scared together." They stayed like that for a long time, holding, breathing, choosing. Later, sitting on the floor, backs against the wall, Ayan rested his head on Ryan's shoulder. "No matter where you go," Ayan said, "don't let distance make us strangers." Ryan kissed his hair softly. "Distance doesn't erase love," he said. "Silence does. And I won't let that happen." They didn't have all the answers, but they had honesty. They had effort. They had each other. And sometimes that was enough. The day Ryan left for the internship, the sky was pale, almost undecided. Ayan stood beside him at the station, hands tucked into his sleeves, heart pressed too tight against his ribs. They had promised not to cry. They failed. Ryan adjusted the strap of his bag, then stopped. He turned to Ayan, studying his face as if trying to memorize it again. "I'll call you as soon as I reach," he said. "I know," Ayan replied softly. Silence stretched. Not the comfortable one they loved, but the fragile kind where words feel too weak. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This doesn't change us." Ayan nodded, eyes shining. "I know, but it changes how we exist." Ryan cupped his face gently, thumbs brushing away tears that refused to listen. "However far I go," he said, "you're still where I belong." Ayan leaned into the touch. "Then come back to me," he whispered. "Every time." Ryan pressed his forehead against Ayan's, breathing him in like oxygen. "I will." When the train finally pulled away, Ayan stood there long after it disappeared, hand over heart, reminding himself that love didn't leave just because someone did. The first week was manageable. Messages flowed constantly. Video calls stretched late into the night. They shared photos of meals, streets, sunsets. Ryan showed Ayan the tiny apartment he was staying in. Bare walls, a narrow window, borrowed furniture. "It feels empty," Ryan admitted. "But hearing your voice helps." Ayan smiled at the screen. "Then I'll talk more." And he did. They talked while brushing teeth, while walking to class, while lying in bed, eyes half closed. Distance felt less threatening when love filled the space. But weeks passed. Ryan's schedule grew heavier. Ayan's days grew quieter. Sometimes calls were missed. Sometimes replies came hours later. Not because love faded, but because exhaustion took over. One night, Ayan waited, phone in hand, lights off. The call never came. He told himself all the right things. He's busy. He's tired. This doesn't mean anything. Still, his chest ached. Loneliness doesn't need logic. It only needs silence. Ryan began to change. Not emotionally, but rhythmically. New colleagues, new routines, new responsibilities. Ayan listened carefully when Ryan talked about his day, but sometimes felt like an observer in a life he wasn't part of. Meanwhile, Ayan's life stayed familiar. Same streets, same cafe, same park, same bench now empty on one side. One evening, Ayan sat there alone, scrolling through old photos of them together. He smiled. Then his throat tightened. It happened without warning. A misunderstanding. A tired reply. A message read but unanswered. Hours passed. Then a day. Then two. Both waited, each expecting the other to reach out first. Pride disguised itself as patience. Fear disguised itself as calm. On the third night, Ayan finally typed, "Are we okay?" Ryan stared at the screen, heart sinking. He replied immediately, "I was afraid you were pulling away." Ayan's hands shook. "I was afraid you forgot me." Ryan closed his eyes. Distance hadn't weakened love. It had exposed fear. That night, they talked longer than they had in weeks. Not about daily events. Not about jokes. About fear. "I feel replaceable," Ayan admitted. "Like I exist only when you remember to look back." Ryan swallowed hard. "I feel like I'm failing you every time I can't be there." They sat with those truths, letting them breathe. "I don't want perfection," Ayan said softly. "I want presence." Ryan nodded. "Then I'll give you that, even when it's messy." They promised something new that night, not to avoid pain, but to speak before it grew roots. Time continued its quiet work. Ayan began focusing more on himself, not to distract, but to strengthen. He studied harder, started jogging in the mornings, wrote more. Ryan noticed the change. "You sound different," he said during one call. "Stronger," Ayan replied with a small smile. "Still yours." Ryan smiled back. "Always mine." They learned that love didn't mean standing still. It meant growing without leaving each other behind. One evening, Ryan mentioned a colleague casually. "She helped me understand the project," he said. Ayan nodded, but something inside him twisted. Later that night, he confessed. "I felt jealous today." Ryan paused. "Thank you for telling me." "I don't want to be that person," Ayan said. "You're human," Ryan replied. "And you trusted me enough to say it." Reassurance followed, not dramatic, not defensive, just honest. "I choose you," Ryan said simply. "Every day." That was enough. Months later, the internship ended. Ryan came back quietly, no announcement, no warning. Ayan was walking home when he saw him, standing there, smiling, real. For a moment, Ayan couldn't move. Then Ryan opened his arms. Ayan walked into them, breath leaving his body as if he'd been holding it for months. "You're here," he whispered. "I'm home," Ryan replied. They sat by the river again, the same place, older now, wiser. "We survived," Ayan said. Ryan nodded. "We changed. Is that okay?" Ayan asked. Ryan smiled softly. "That's love." They held hands, fingers fitting naturally. No rush, no fear. Just two people who chose each other again. Love changes when it survives. It no longer asks, "Will you stay?" Quietly says, "I am here." After Ryan returned, things didn't magically become perfect. But they became real in a way they never had before. Distance had carved patience into them. Fear had taught them honesty. Time had softened their edges. And now, love was ready to become something deeper. Ryan didn't move back into Ayan's life like he had never left. He entered carefully. He noticed how Ayan paused before speaking sometimes. How he had grown more independent. How his smile carried strength now, not just warmth. "You changed," Ryan said one evening. Ayan looked up from his book. "So did you." Ryan nodded. "Do you miss who we were?" Ayan thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said softly. "I like who we became." That answer stayed with Ryan for a long time. They started again, not from the beginning but from understanding. Some evenings were spent quietly, sitting on opposite sides of the room, doing their own things. Love didn't need constant proof anymore. Presence was enough. The weight of reality. Reality, however, doesn't disappear just because love is strong. One night, Ryan spoke what he'd been holding back. "My family is starting to ask questions," he said. Ayan felt the familiar tightness in his chest. "About us?" "About my future," Ryan replied carefully. "Marriage, stability, expectations." Ayan looked down. "And where do I fit in that?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. That silence hurt, but it was honest. "I don't have all the answers," Ryan said. "But I know one thing." He reached for Ayan's hand. "I don't want a future where you're missing." Ayan's eyes filled. "Sometimes love isn't enough for society." Ryan nodded. "Then we'll have to decide what matters more." That night, Ayan lay awake again. But this time he didn't hide it. "I'm scared," he said into the darkness. Ryan turned toward him. "Tell me." "I'm scared I'll always be the part of your life that stays hidden." Ryan closed his eyes. "That fear is real," he admitted. "And it hurts that I can't erase it." Ayan swallowed. "I don't want to be your secret forever." Ryan held his hand tighter. "You're not a secret. You're just not safe everywhere yet." That truth was heavy, but it was shared. And that mattered. They didn't fight. They talked. Long conversations. Quiet pauses. Tears without blame. They learned that love didn't always look like courage. Sometimes it looked like waiting. Sometimes it looked like choosing peace over impulse. Sometimes it looked like staying even when the path ahead wasn't clear. Weeks later, they attended a small gathering. Friends, laughter, warmth. Nothing unusual. Until someone asked casually, "So Ryan, anyone special in your life?" The room went quiet, not suspicious, just curious. Ryan glanced at Ayan. Just a glance. But in that moment, 1,000 decisions collided. He took a breath. "Yes," he said. Ayan's heart stopped. "I'm with someone I love very deeply. No names, no labels, but no denial either." Ayan felt something unlock inside him. Later that night, alone, he asked softly, "Why did you say that?" Ryan replied, "Because hiding you felt worse than risking myself." Ayan cried into his shoulder. Not from sadness, but relief. That night, Ayan said something he had never said before. "I don't need promises about forever," he said. "I need honesty about now." Ryan smiled gently. "Then here's my honesty." He took Ayan's face in his hands. "I choose you, not secretly, not temporarily, not conveniently. I choose you as my truth, even when it's difficult." Ayan nodded through tears. "That's all I ever wanted." Forever didn't arrive like a wedding or a declaration. It arrived quietly, in shared groceries, in arguments resolved without damage, in sickness and care, in bad moods forgiven, in ordinary days that felt safe. One evening, sitting together on the floor, Ayan asked, "Do you think love gets boring?" Ryan smiled. "Only if you confuse peace with boredom." Ayan laughed softly. "Then I hope we grow very boring together." Ryan kissed his forehead. "Me too." They returned to the river years later. Older, calmer, still holding hands. "Do you remember how scared we were?" Ayan asked. Ryan nodded. "Do you remember how gentle it was?" Ayan smiled. "It still is." They stood there watching the water flow, unchanged, yet never the same. Just like them, their love was no longer fragile. It had been tested, bent, stretched, and it held. Not because the world made space for it, but because they made space for each other. Years passed, not dramatically, not loudly. They passed like mornings did, with routine, with warmth, with familiarity that felt safe instead of dull. They moved into a small place together. Nothing fancy, a narrow balcony, one window that caught the afternoon sun just right. The first night there, they sat on the floor eating simple food out of containers. "This doesn't feel real," Ayan said. Ryan smiled. "It feels earned." That was the difference. Love in the ordinary. Their love lived in small, unremarkable things. Ayan humming while making tea. Ryan folding laundry incorrectly on purpose just to make Ayan laugh. Arguments about grocery lists. Silences that didn't need filling. Some nights they talked for hours. Other nights they shared space without words. Love no longer demanded proof. It simply existed. The world didn't suddenly become kind. There were still questions, still assumptions, still moments of discomfort. But something had changed. Ayan no longer felt invisible. Ryan no longer felt divided. They chose carefully who to let in. They built a circle, not large but honest. One day, Ryan introduced Ayan simply as, "This is the person I share my life with." No explanation, no apology. Ayan squeezed his hand afterward. "That meant everything," he said. Ryan replied quietly, "It's the truth. Love didn't make life easy. There were financial worries, career disappointments, illness, loss. One winter, Ayan fell sick for weeks. Ryan stayed up night after night, changing towels, whispering reassurance, holding him when fear crept in. "You don't have to be strong," Ryan said once. "Just be here." And Ayan was. Another year, Ryan faced failure that shook his confidence. Ayan didn't offer empty encouragement, just presence. "You are allowed to rest," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." And Ryan believed him. Growing older together. Time left marks, laugh lines, softer steps, slower mornings. But love aged beautifully. They learned to forgive quicker, to speak softer, to listen deeper. One evening, watching the sunset from their balcony, Ayan asked, "If we could go back, would you choose me again?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Every version of you, every lifetime." Ion smiled, eyes warm. That's all I ever needed. On an anniversary they didn't count anymore. They returned to the river. The same place, different people. They stood quietly, fingers intertwined. This is where everything began, Ion said. Ryan nodded. And where nothing ended. They sat on the grass, watching the water move forward endlessly. Do you think love fades? Ion asked. Ryan thought for a moment. I think passion fades, he said. Fear fades. Drama fades. What stays is choice. Ion leaned his head against Ryan's shoulder. I like what stayed. Forever didn't arrive as a promise carved in stone. It arrived as shared breakfasts, hard conversations, silent understanding, loyalty without performance, love without fear. Forever was waking up and knowing, this is home. One night, much later, lying in bed as rain tapped gently against the window, Ion spoke softly. Thank you for loving me gently. Ryan turned toward him. Thank you for staying. They didn't say always. They didn't need to. Their love was not loud. It did not ask the world for permission. It did not need applause. It was calm. It was patient. It was chosen again and again. And in the end, that was everything. Time had softened everything. Morning came slower now. Knees protested. Silence lingered longer than it once did. The world outside felt louder, faster, more impatient. Inside their home, things were calm. Ion stood by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, watching the street wake up. Ryan sat nearby, reading without urgency. Neither spoke. They had learned that silence, when shared, was not emptiness. Did you sleep well? Ryan asked eventually. Ion smiled. I slept knowing where I belong. Ryan looked up, eyes gentle. Then I slept well too. They no longer tried to prove love. No grand gestures. No dramatic declarations. No fear of losing each other to time. Love lived in memory now. In knowing how the other took their tea. In remembering which songs carried weight. In the instinct to reach out when the other grew quiet. Sometimes they argued, softly, briefly. Sometimes they misunderstood. But never once did they doubt us. Outside, the world changed rapidly. New words, new struggles, new freedoms still unfinished. Younger people spoke openly now, braver than Ion and Ryan had ever been in their youth. It filled them with something close to awe. One afternoon, sitting in the park, Ion watched a young couple laughing without fear. He smiled, but there was sadness too. We paved a small part of that road, he said quietly. Ryan nodded. Even if no one knows our names, that felt enough. Time had done something unexpected. It had made people kinder. Neighbors stopped asking questions. Friends stopped whispering. Family stopped avoiding the truth. Not everyone accepted them fully, but many did. They no longer mattered. One day, a relative introduced them simply as, they've been together forever. No explanation. No correction. Ion felt Ryan's hand squeeze his. That squeeze said everything. Aging is not romantic. Bodies ache. Energy fades. Fear returns, quietly. 1 year Ryan fell ill. Not life-threatening, but serious enough to shift the rhythm of their days. Ion became careful, attentive, gentle in ways he hadn't been before. You don't have to hover, Ryan joked weakly. Ion replied firmly, I want to. He cooked. He waited. He watched over Ryan's sleep like it was sacred. One night, Ryan whispered, half asleep, if something happens to me. Ion stopped him. No, he said softly. We are not borrowing time. We are living it. Ryan reached for his hand, and believed him. They kept memories alive. Old letters in a drawer. Photos from times when youth still lingered in their faces. Notes written decades ago, edges worn thin. One rainy afternoon, Ion found the letter from his birthday, the one by the river. He read it slowly. His hands trembled, not from age but emotion. Ryan watched him. You still keep that? He asked. Ion smiled through tears. It's proof that I was loved gently. Ryan replied, you still are. One evening, as night settled softly, Ayan spoke carefully. "When I'm gone, will you be okay?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I won't be the same, but I will be full." Ayan nodded. "Then promise me you'll live, not just survive." Ryan took his hand. "Only if you promise the same." They didn't say who would go first. They didn't need to. They returned to the river again. Slower steps, careful balance. The river didn't remember them, but they remembered everything. "This is where I learned what love really was," Ayan said. Ryan smiled. "This is where I stopped being afraid." They sat quietly, hands intertwined. No tears, just gratitude. They never became famous, never became symbols, never became stories others told loudly. But they became something better. They became real. It taught that love doesn't need to be dramatic to be powerful. "If there is another life," Ryan finished the thought. "Find me." Ayan smiled. "I always do." Epilogue. What remains? Love does not end. It echoes. In kindness learned. In fear unlearned. In quiet courage passed forward. Somewhere, someone loves more gently because Ayan and Ryan existed. And that is how love becomes infinite.